A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We start today's dars with a recitation from the Holy Quran, and I'll be reading Surah Al-Furqan, verse 74. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. وَالَّذِينَ إِذَا ذُكِّرُوا بِآيَاتِ رَبِّهِمْ لَمْ يَخِرُّوا عَلَيْهَا صُمًّا وَعُمْيَانًا. I seek refuge with Allah from Satan the accursed, in the name of Allah, the most gracious, the ever merciful. And those who, when they are reminded of the signs of their Lord, fall not deaf and blind thereat. This verse is an incredibly important one, as it talks about the characteristics before and after it of those people that believe and those people who will be rewarded by Allah the Almighty. It says they will be rewarded a high place in paradise because they were steadfast. It talks about the characteristics of these particular people. It's common sense. When you have a problem at home, you call a professional. If you have a plumbing problem, if you have an electrical problem, you call the company that is known to deal with those things. And when you call them up, it might take a while for your call to get through, but they send a professional around. Now, when they come to your door, before letting them into your house, of course, you try to work out who they are. And often the question that we ask is, do you have any ID on you? And when they show you proper ID that you recognize, you understand, and you think, yes, that's exactly what I asked for, and British Gas is on its way, and this is the person from British Gas, you open the door and you let them in. The spiritual realm is very similar. When we are in a spiritual world where we are full of problems and afflictions, we turn and we pick up the phone, figuratively, and pray to Allah. And we ask and we say, Ihdina Salat al-Mustaqim. We ask for guidance to come from Allah the Almighty. And so God, answering that call, sends his technician, of course in the shape and the form of a prophet. That prophet then comes, and as the technician, the professional that comes to our door, he also carries with him means of identification. When the people ask and say, we asked for someone, but how do we know it's you? He pulls out his ID. In this case, he pulls out the signs of God that show that he is who he is claiming to be. And then, when he shows the identification, it is down to us to open the door and to let him in. The technician into our house to fix the leaky pipe or the short-circuited plug, or indeed our spirituality and our way of living when it comes to the elect and those sent by Allah the Almighty. So signs are very, very important for us to discuss, because those are the only way by which we can ascertain and identify whether someone is truly who they say they are, especially when it comes to the people of God. When it comes to the prophets, what other way do we have other than the signs that they come with to work out if someone truly is a prophet of God and someone who has come with a mission from the divine? When we talk about the promised Messiah, ﷺ, there are indeed, this is not an exaggeration to say, thousands upon thousands of examples that we can take to prove the truth and the veracity of the claims of the promised Messiah, to show that he was who he says he was. But indeed, for me personally, there are two which completely blow everything out of the water, that leave absolutely no room or any wiggle room for someone who wants to feign ignorance or to say, no, I don't believe. And we'll go on to them in a moment. The verses that I read in the beginning are very, very important, because they talk about those people who do not fall deaf and dumb thereat, or they do not ignore, they're not blind, they're not deaf, they're not dumb to those signs of Allah the Almighty. But it says that when they are reminded of the signs. For me, that's very important. Because to me, that says that they know that the signs exist. They've heard of them. They've witnessed them. But because in the past they have feigned ignorance, they've said, I don't understand. Again, when they're reminded them of again, some people become blind and deaf thereat. So again, this is very, very important because people know the signs. In this day and age, people that do not accept the promised Messiah ﷺ, do not do so because they haven't seen the signs. Those that are in opposition to the mission of this divine prophet, they do so knowing full well the signs of Allah the Almighty, and yet still, as the Quran says, they are deaf, dumb and blind thereat. See, there are two types of people in the world. There are those that mould their religion around their lives, and there are those that mould their lives around their religion. And these signs of God distinguish which category a person falls into. There are times when we are told to do things that we do not agree with, but because we know they are from God, we act upon them immediately. And there are others in the world who, despite knowing and recognizing the truth and the power of God's signs, still turn away in aversion. And this is not just here at the time of the promised Messiah ﷺ. Indeed, the Quran explains to us that every prophet experienced this. Even when the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ called his people and said, if I was to say to you that there is an army advancing behind us, would you believe me? They said, yes, of course. And yet when he talked to them about the message of God, they turned away. Why? Not because they didn't believe him, because they did not want to believe him, because it did not coincide with what they wanted with their lives. It reminds you of that very famous saying, truth will always be the truth, regardless of a lack of understanding, disbelief, or ignorance. Sign number 1. This is a sign which to me is one of the most powerful signs of the truth of the promised Messiah. For our Mahdi, there are 2 signs which have never appeared before since the creation of the heavens and the earth. That the moon will be eclipsed on the first night in Ramadan, and the sun will be eclipsed on the middle day thereof. And these signs have not appeared since God created the heavens and the earth. Dar-Qutni, volume 1, page 188. Now we've all heard this hadith many times about how the first day is of the first potential days of the eclipse. The middle day again is the potential middle day of the eclipses of the 3 days. And we've heard about how extraordinary it was. But have you really sat and thought about just how phenomenal this sign is? We know that God fulfilled this sign in 1894 and 1895, twice. We know that Hazrat Masih Maud claimed to be a Mahdi, and this was in direct accordance with a prophecy made by the Holy Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. But how amazing is it that this is the one sign that could not be manufactured by any human being? That God chose the biggest, grandest stage to show without any shadow of a doubt that this is my Messiah. How could he have planned it? How could he have manipulated the sun and the moon to do exactly what he needed to in his life while he claimed to be the Messiah and the Mahdi? How? It's impossible. And the only excuse that people have to fall deaf, dumb and blind thereat is to say, it's a weak hadith. How can this be a weak hadith when it is proven in the skies? A weak hadith means that they are unsure whether the relation or the narration is solid or not. But when the thing has come to pass, when it is before you in front of your eyes, which fool says it's weak? If I say there's a dragon outside, perhaps you won't believe me. If you open the door and see a dragon, will you still turn around to me and say, I'm not too sure about what you said was true or not? This is just being foolish. This is what the Quran says, being deaf, dumb and blind at the signs of their Lord. In fact, go a step further. Let's say this was a huge coincidence. Would God, who other people who reject the promised Messiah, who themselves say that He is powerful to do all things, would He not have stopped the eclipse of the sun and the moon, lest the people on the earth would fall into error and misguidance because of something that He told the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, to say? Would He not have stopped the moon and the sun being eclipsed, thinking, my people will of course see this as a sign from me. I said that it would happen and now it is happening. Do we, na'uzubillah, think that God made a mistake? No. This is the grandest prophecy, not once, but twice. That it should be left under no illusion to anyone in the entire world that this is my Messiah. Something which was not able to be impacted or manipulated by any man, but by God's hand it came about. What is left for there to prove? What is left for there to be said? Sign number 2. We all know in the Quran, God states, كَتَبَ اللَّهُ لَأَغْلِبَنَا أَنَا وَرُسُلِي, that Allah has decreed that most surely I will prevail, I and my messengers. Forget the challenges, the mubahilas, the endless service to Islam, the living every day, fulfilling the message of God, the countless prophecies. Forget all of that. If you want to ignore it, ignore it. God has given a very basic and very fundamental promise. I will succeed and my messengers will succeed. How simple can it be? From one man to over 200 countries around the world. From Bayt al-Dua, a small room, to we are seeing the renovation of Bayt al-Futur, one mosque of how many? If this is not God's fazl, if this is not God's grace and blessings and a sign of His divine support, what is? What are people looking for as a sign of God's support? Then turning the words of one man into a grand prophecy fulfilled in every country of the world. There's that famous sher, "Ek qatra uske fazl ne darya bana diya," that one drop of His grace turned into a river, an ocean. Is this not sign enough? How is this possible without the help of God? Would God not have struck down such a community? Would God not have stopped such a man who was misleading people? If there was something negative to see, we would have seen it by now, and yet still. Not only did the heavens pay witness and testimony to the truth of the promised Messiah, but every single day, every single person watching this pays testimony and witness as well. That indeed, Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian alayhi salatu wasalam was the Messiah, for whom the skies spoke, for whom the heavens spoke, for whom every second of every minute of every hour, every day, of every month, every year, since the time he came till now, is testimony that indeed the Messiah has come. And on the contrast, what do those say who decide to cover their eyes, their ears, who decide to ignore the obvious signs of God? Where is your Messiah? Where is the Savior that you are relying on while your generations die in ignorance? While they die waiting for a man to descend from the skies like some sort of storybook, like some sort of sequel to a Marvel film. When will you realize that you are turning your religion into a farce, when the signs of God are so evident and manifest before you, your fathers, your forefathers, and your children to come? If this is not ignorance, purposeful ignorance, purposeful denial, what is? These signs not only prove the veracity and the truth of the promised Messiah, but of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam before him, who said that a Messiah would come with these signs. Not only him, but in fact of the existence of God himself, upon whose authority these signs and claims were made. One in the skies for everyone to see, and one in the earth for everyone to live and experience. What more needs to be said? And yet still, it says in the Holy Quran, even if you quicken for them the dead, even if you bring the dead to life, or cause the living to die, they will not believe. And that is the key. Believers accept the signs of God because of the faith and the righteousness in their hearts. But those who are corrupt, those who mold their religion around their lives for monetary gains, for political gains, to achieve what they want to achieve in life, and pushing religion and the Quran and Islam aside, as the ahadith have promised us, for these people, no sign will ever be enough. But for the righteous, these two signs are more proof than is needed to understand that indeed Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad of Qadian alayhi salatu wasalam was that prophesied prophet of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of God be upon him, that Messiah, that Mahdi who was to bring the people back towards God. And the world would do well to understand this manifest truth. Wa akhir da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alameen.